We have founders that grew up as farmers that are building software companies.
Wow.
We have commodity traders and software engineers who are now farmers growing lemna and extracting protein out of it. And, I share that because the spectrum of success is only possible because of this marrying of immigrant talent, ambition, hustle, and really grit. To date, we've supported over 200 immigration filings across 15 plus different visa categories, so far with a 100% success rate. We've never passed on an opportunity because the company was too early for us. We have passed because it was too late. I grew up in Mexico. I moved to the US when I was 10. And so seeing that journey up close and living it for ourselves, we do have a unique understanding of the challenges immigrant founders face when they decide to build in this country. And there really is something about having a passport with the eagle on the front of it that makes us feel like we can do a lot.
What are those myths that you think as a VC have, spotted and that needs to be addressed?
Let's go beyond those patterns.
So it's kind of the unschooled school that I can look at.
And that gives us the signal that helps us invest in people before there's product, before there were customers, before there's revenue.
And to my surprise, the surprise questions from the founders or the professionals that have come across is very different. This episode of Passionate Pulse is brought to you by Atlantic.net, the official cloud hosting partner of the San Jose Earthquakes and the trusted choice for startups and developers. Get fast, secure, and compliant cloud hosting, plus $15 free credits and a free 8 GB server for your first year. Use promo code PULSE50 at Atlantic.net while it lasts. Atlantic.net, built for builders, trusted by champions. Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Passionate Pulse podcast. And today we are opening a wonderful series where we are hosting VCs, investors, and they're going to talk about how the VC will look like, at the same time, how the VC will look like to the founders and vice versa. It's going to be an interesting conversations. And this series, which is known as a Capital Pulse, is bringing investors and VC for you to understand what it really takes to get the VC funding. And at the same time, what VCs are evaluating, how they really pursue founders or how do they really perceive certain ideas, and what are certain misconceptions that the founders hold in their own mind that needs to be broken. And that's why we are having investors on this particular series. Welcome all. And today I'm excited to host Ale. She's from Unshackled Ventures, the venture that, talks about the immigrant founders, and they really support all over the world's immigrants who have come to United States and they want to start something, they want to start building. And what are some of the biggest support as an immigrant need? Mostly visa and other, a lot of barriers that they come with, or some of the preconceived notions. Being an immigrant, they're supposed to just work on the jobs to retain visa and a lot of things. So they are here to break all these misconceptions and also help us out what needs to be done, and founders from the immigrant world, how they can emerge fast. So I'm very excited and at the same time very humbled to have Unshackled VCs firm to come forward and are going to address this immigrant community. I come from India, or as you call it, I'm an immigrant myself. So for me, I think this is one of the very insightful conversation that I'm going to host, and very close to my heart, to be honest, that somebody is there out to back me up, or being my backbone, and to many other immigrants. So I think it's really a little bit of an emotional journey for me as well. So welcome, Ali, and thank you so much for taking out a great time from your life today to address our community.
No, thank you, Pranali. I appreciate you reaching out to chat, and really admire the work that you do on this podcast as well, demystifying so many concepts for people. It's important.
Thank you. So, as we unfold, I think the first thing that I like to understand, or, get this address is, being so young, when somebody is looking out for a career trajectory, instead of picking certain functional roles with your education background and anything, on top of it, you have taken a big risk in your life. The year that you started was a phenomenal year in the industry overall. After 2008 of downturn, 2022 was another downturn that a lot of industry people experience. That was the year you began. It's very controversial or like very ironical stories, I would say. But being so young and decided to take a plunge as an investor was another big risk that you decided to take. So, the female investor going to the Unshackled Ventures, starting out at an year where, everything was falling off. I first would like to, understand or, little bit get more insights about your journey, what it really, what was the needle that you decided to move? What really triggered you to start as an investor?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question because I honestly never thought I was gonna be an investor, if I'm being completely honest. I'll give you some background in the sense that like I entrepreneurship has been central to me and my family's existence in this country since I can remember. And so entrepreneurship has always surrounded me in a certain capacity. But I mean, I started my career in Washington, D.C. I was working at the time with the Department of Justice, the State Department. I really thought I was going to go down more of a diplomacy route in my career. And then I think I realized, a few years in that I wanted to try something new. And I pivoted into kind of merging my experience with policy and business into one place. And so that's when I transitioned more into consulting. I was working at an international business consulting firm in DC. At the time, working with companies like Uber and WhatsApp on really their expansion plans to Latin America, so Mexico and Brazil specifically.
Mhm.
And I love that. I think it was a really cool intersection of like my two passions merging. And then I ended up moving to Brazil and I worked at a tech incubator there, which is where I think I really realized how much I appreciated and loved working with founders at day zero at the earliest stages. At any given time, I was working with like 6 Brazilian startups. And so that was an incredible experience. I then made my way back to the States, did some marketing and comms work with consumer tech companies right before joining Unshackled. And so I think I have a very untraditional, unconventional path into venture. But I think, when I was coming back to the States, I was very curious about who, having worked with early stage startups, seeing their own fundraising journeys in Brazil, in Mexico, and in the United States. It all kind of trickled back to like who is sitting in check writing positions. And I think as I started to do more research on the statistics of how many women are in check writing positions, how many Latina women, even more, are in check writing positions, my curiosity peaked, and I think it started to open doors around there are ways in which I can support founders the way I have at day zero, um, maybe even earlier, and with actual capital to propel them to pursue their dreams. And so I knew I wanted to transition into venture, but I also knew I didn't have a network in the VC ecosystem. And this industry, for better or for worse, is an industry about who you know. And so very quickly, I knew that I needed to build that network.
Hmm.
And the first thing I did was look for investors that look like me. That was like my natural North Star. Let me just find people who I think are values aligned with me, who maybe appreciate my perspectives, my lived experiences, um, and let me reach out to them first to see how they broke into the industry. And I did that. And when I started doing that research, I came across investors like Maria Salamanca, who's a partner at Ulu Ventures, Miriam Rivera, who's the GP at Ulu Ventures, Jamira um, Herrera, who's a partner at Reach Capital. These are women who have broken into the industry before me, who look like me. And I reached out to them. And at the same time, I came across an organization called Somos VC, which is an organization aimed at increasing the number of Latinx check writers in VC positions. Um, and the timing just aligned perfectly. They were launching their How to Break into Venture Fellowship. I applied, I got in. The rest is history. I kind of went through the recruitment process from there. But I always say, like, I think my why for being in venture is very personal, and I think it always will be, right? Like, I didn't come into venture to invest in companies that may or may not succeed.
Mm.
I came into venture because I wanted to support and back the issues that I care about solving. And that's really my motivation. And I'll give you like some quick background on me even more. Probably what's not on LinkedIn is that I grew up in Mexico. I moved to the US when I was 10. And like I alluded to earlier, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs that then became immigrant entrepreneurs in the US when we moved when I was 10. And so I think from a very young age, just being surrounded by that immigrant entrepreneurial mindset, it's influenced everything in my life, right? How I spend my time, who I spend it with, which is now a full culmination of the awesome work I get to do at Unshackled. So a lot there of my unconventional journey, but in hindsight, I think looking back, it makes a lot of sense on how I got here.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, I think that is a very personal connection with which you're driving the force, right? And there is a clear-cut purpose that you have to unfold further and how you would support. And I feel like the representation matters a lot. So I mean, it's have it or no on the table, but it's like, sometimes or many a times initially we attract similar people that look like us, that talk like us, that have similar backgrounds, and to whom, you can get connect on a very easy note. So I think that really helps, you kind of understand somebody else much better, resonating with the backgrounds and what step you have taken. I'm sure the Latin Americans are gonna, cherish it forever. I'm sure a lot of investment will become unconventional from the common nodes point of view. But when such VCs walk in, they are someone who can figure out something that many others will not look into. And the unconventional investments, what we call that's when these things come into the play. So you said a lot, considering your family was the first immigrant over here and they were into these businesses. So how that looked like, that really made you sure, like, that going and backing certain immigrants give them a lot of strength coming from a lot of personal experiences. I think that's something we'll like to know, and many of us are in the similar boat and would be very interested in understanding what it looks like when there is no support and somebody is basically trying to dive everything by themselves versus having a support. So that's when the VCs or the investors come into the role play. What is it that it looks like if you are just sort of doing everything by yourself?
Yeah, I think what you alluded to there is at Unshackled, our core investment thesis is to back teams with at least one foreign-born founder on the founding team. And for Unshackled, I think when we think about how to truly unlock these founders, I think it starts with recognizing that there is just so much unimaginable human potential in this group of people. And it's oftentimes unrealized potential, right? For only one reason, which is that their journeys began somewhere else, right? And there really is something about having a passport with the eagle on the front of it that makes us feel like we can do a lot. But if you come to the United States, to your point, with no connections, no community, no clouds, you're oftentimes starting back at zero. And so for us at Unshackled, we look at all of this as original perspectives, right? These stories, unique life experiences, and this existential motivation that's really inherent within each immigrant founder. And I think that's oftentimes why immigrants and immigrant founders have been so successful in this country. And so for us, because their stories begin elsewhere, the way we think about it is how do we learn about their stories before they came to the US? And I think that allows us to do something unique in that we underwrite their potential. And part of why we can do that is because we've been in their shoes, right? Our entire team at Unshackled is made up of immigrants or children of immigrants. We've either started our own companies, grew up around parents who were immigrant entrepreneurs. We've supported founders from day zero for over 10 years. And so seeing that journey up close and living it for ourselves, we do have a unique understanding of the challenges immigrant founders face when they decide to build in this country. So I think the first is obviously immigration, right? I think as immigrants, you come to this country on a visa, and there's this massive list of things that you're told you can't do, a murkier list of things that you somehow can do. Um, and for many, when they decide, I know I want to be an entrepreneur, I know I want to build a company in the US, it's at that point that an immigrant founder finds themselves, I think, really at a crossroads. I want to spend my time becoming an US immigration expert, or do I want to spend my time building my company? And many founders will say the latter, right? They want to spend their time building. And so it's at that point when you, as an immigrant founder, need to surround yourself with people who can knock down those walls for you, which could be a really good immigration attorney, or it could be someone like Unshackled to support you through that. So at Unshackled, we are the only venture fund that has immigration attorneys as part of the partnership at the fund. So to date, we've supported over 200 immigration filings across 15 plus different visa categories, so far with 100% success rate. And so we're incredibly proud about that. We want to keep it that way. So that's one, right? Immigration is huge. But I think we also know that when immigrants decide to start their own businesses, they often lack what we call the 3 Cs, which is capital, community, and clout. And so if we take capital as the first C, when you think about immigrants, they traditionally don't have access to that friends and family round that US born founders often do, or at least have easier access to.
Right.
And so at Unshackled, we are acting as that friends and family round type of check for immigrants. So we invest pre-product, pre-revenue, pre-incorporation, even in many instances. We really do like to be that first check, often investing anywhere between 300K to 750K into the first round of capital. So we are very comfortable investing at the earliest stages. And then we have community. When you think about community, I think networks are a key asset when you're building your company. The difference between really success and failure is not what you know, it's who you know and when. And so as an entrepreneur, you do need access to people who will accelerate your journey, whether that's through capital, through talent, through access to customers. All of that is just access. And I think at Unshackled, we have been incredibly intentional with how we've created our community, whether that's through our internal portfolio founder network or our operator network, our LP network. We think a lot about how do we be the bridge between you and another founder in our portfolio who is operating in a similar or adjacent space so that the two of you can share best practices on go-to-market, sales, customer acquisition. How can we expedite kind of your talent recruiting within those networks? It's all about optimizing founder time on our end. That's really how we think about building our community. And so access to our community, I think, just allows our immigrant founders to succeed faster. And then the last piece that I'll mention is just clout, right? We have the benefit of investing in the top talent from all over the world. If you think about it, 1 million to 1.5 million immigrants come into the US per year. That group is beating out 7 billion people to be selected by US schools, employers to come here, right? That's not easy. That's a lot of competition to outcompete. And so effectively, over the past 10 years, we've become the signal that follow-on investors follow when they're looking for the best immigrant founders. So we've been very intentional with how we built networks with downstream investors to really shortcut the amount of time that our portfolio founders have to spend on raising capital downstream. And that's that clout and that network and that ability to garner kind of that excitement behind teams does require, unfortunately, in today's day and age, someone else coming in and being that first believer in what you're building and in you as an individual.
Yeah, I truly agree that, being a light lamp to someone, and guiding them since their day zero or even prior to that is also it's a very crucial role, in fact, somebody could play. Because if there is no confidence in that level, how somebody is going to be at 10 step ahead or 100 steps ahead when there are, the first 10s have not walked in. And that's where I feel like the pre-seed investment or, seed investments are very, very crucial in founder's life. So, having understood all of it, and everybody, I think all individuals would agree to this, like everyone would agree to it, that yes, having such kind of community cloud and the capital access is important. But somebody has to vouch for it and somebody has to, make this system open for you. So the first and a very foremost question that every founder would be asking is like, I'm an immigrant, let's say, like considering we are looking at the Unshackled Ventures. I'm an immigrant founder. I have a great idea. But right now I cannot even hire my first couple of engineers, my founding engineers, because, that means that for an annum, like, I'm looking out their salary or, how to structure out things. On top of it, a lot of infrastructure that somebody has to, building up. So how do you really decide to take that idea to the next level? What are the important basics that the founders should be clear with? How their pitch looks like? I mean, considering you must have analyzed more than 1,000 pitches so far, or I don't know, it
Definitely.
could be like, yeah. So, what are those important factors that the basic study or, basic, what we say is a grounding exercises that the founders must be ready in order to seek this kind of support from Unshackled Ventures in particular?
Mm. Yeah, I think the answer to like the VC ready question is going to vary depending on every VC you talk to. I think even across pre-seed, right? This varies at different funds. Some pre-seed funds would say that a VC ready startup is one that has a strong team, a validated problem, early traction, a clear path to scale. And I think we think of VC ready pretty differently at Unshackled. It's really never too early for us. It's never too early to start a conversation with Unshackled if you are sure that you want to be an entrepreneur and you have an idea. How early that idea is doesn't matter really on our end. We've never passed on an opportunity because the company was too early for us. We have passed because it was too late. So, if it's progressed, there's revenue now. There's a lot more traction. There are other investors out there that can now see those signals and want to invest. And then we have to ask ourselves, like, why are we so lucky to win this investment? We really love being pre-product, pre-revenue, and like I said, pre-incorporation, even in many instances, because I think the real unique skill that we've built as a team is how to find founder potential in people where that founder signal is not clear yet.
Mm.
There are a lot of patterns that the VC industry has traditionally looked at, right? Like when you think about what school did you go to? So if you went to a Harvard, an MIT, a Stanford, because those schools have produced great founders, VCs are tracking you, right? Same thing if you worked for certain tech companies, VCs are tracking you. Now, the issue with that kind of pattern recognition is that that pattern recognition is really the antithesis to what has been the success for investors, which is the outlier founders. So our thinking at Unshackled is let's go beyond those patterns. Let's look for what's really unique about each person or team of people who are building this and look for signals that show us that there is a potential in this team or this group of people to become large company builders. And so a lot of our investment process is uncovering those signals by appreciating a founder's journey up until the point that we're having that conversation, right? Where did you grow up? What were the events that like happened in your life that shaped you, shaped how you make decisions? What kind of judgment do you apply to get to where you are today? Um, Judgment as an entrepreneur is a big thing that we look for. And I think when you appreciate someone's story, you get to appreciate what kind of judgments have they applied? What kind of decisions have they made? What risk have they taken in their life? And that gives us the signal that helps us invest in people before there's product, before there are customers, um, before there's revenue. And then we become the signal that the rest of the industry follows, because at that point, there are the traditional signals that most VCs are more comfortable taking bets on. But we're comfortable going even earlier.
Wow. So I feel like the Unshackled story, like, basically how they're looking or evaluating founders is most likely they're interested in becoming family of someone at the very first, and then also guiding them throughout the journey. So it's kind of a the unschooled school that I can look at. If you have an idea, and that idea is worth pursuing, is what first Unshackle will, help us evaluate, like, whether this is something has a potential. If not, then, what are the other things that the founder has a potential to pursue. So there are, I think, a lot of mentorship that I see that will walk in even prior to the capital to any of the founders. And that's kind of a support that every immigrant would be looking forward to. I'm very impressed to see that there are a lot of VCs out there nowadays who are looking forward for, this unconventional journeys and are vouching for it, because a lot of times a lot of founders have very unique and personal experiences that will drive the business, or that will solve the most important problems in the world that are today. And that is something, there is no exception towards it. So whether it's you are a good schooler or not, whether you have got an opportunity or you were equipped with better capital in early as a child or not, but for sure the experiences that you have been gifted, they can be, far more navigating in this journey. And I'm very hopeful that, when you mentioned this journey, that many of the founders, after listening to this particular, couple of sentences that you mentioned, are gonna bounce back to Unshackled VCs and you're gonna see a lot of ideation pitches coming around. So if
Yeah.
not anything, then, what is that people have to submit to the Unshackle, even if it's an idea? And another question that I have following to this is, considering the Unshackled Ventures is industry agnostic, so it's not something like a tech perspective. Somebody is gonna come and seek a help from you. What are the other trends, or what are the other industries that Unshackled had supported till now that can become another lightning path for somebody who is looking forward for capital, community, cloud, and a lot of family stuff that you're gonna bond with them?
Yeah. So to the first point, we have a pretty transparent investment process on our end. So we have a pitch us form on our website. And regardless if you are being introduced to me through a warm connection that you were able to get, or you don't have a network yet and you can't get a warm connection to me, we have every single founder who wants to start an investment conversation with us fill out the pitch us form on our website. And we really do this to democratize access to our team, right? Giving everyone equal access. Everyone on our team, everyone who submits the form on our website, I should say, will get their opportunity reviewed by our team, regardless if it is a warm or cold intro. Um, and so part of that form is, yes, we do ask for a pitch deck or even an investment memo. I prefer reading investment memos than pitch decks when they're done well. And part of why we do that is, even in the earliest stages, a crucial part of being a successful founder is being able to clearly articulate your vision and clearly articulate a story. And so, at a very base level, you have to be able to articulate, I am an expert in this space, and therefore I see huge inefficiencies in this space, and I think this is the solution to solve it. You don't need to have all of the answers. You don't need to have all of the revenue and the traction and all of the other metrics that other VCs maybe look for, but you need to have a clear articulation around founder problem fit. I think that is the biggest thing that we look for is, why are you uniquely positioned to solve within the space and to solve this problem? I just add that because while I do want to encourage that it's never too early for us, there is opportunity cost for every immigrant founder who's deciding to sit in the founder seat, right? And we do uncover, well, what have you de-risked for yourself to give you the confidence that this is actually worth your time to spend time on, right? We have those conversations with founders to better appreciate how they value their time, and that's why they're choosing to want to build a company in this space. So there's that component. I also think that there's a huge part of immigrant entrepreneurship story in this country that I don't think gets talked about enough. Um, to your second question around like, where are we investing and where are we seeing the industries that we're seeing immigrant founders dive into? Many of the immigrant founders in our portfolio are working in industries that are critical to American success. So whether it's energy, defense, uh, Gen AI, logistics, our food supply chain, aviation safety, which is huge right now. We have an immigrant founded company in every single one of those categories. So, really, the way we think about it is immigrants are at the forefront of disruption across all of the industries that are critical to American success. And thus, immigrants are really our country's national advantage at a global scale.
Wow. That's a massive industry that you're spanning. Uh, like considering the food, supply chain, logistics, which are very essential problems to be solved and backed up, basically. It's a very rare path to see. I mean, considering aviation, defense, energy, these are big infrastructure industries. And I think all VCs would jump into that. But looking at, these industries that you mentioned, which are very critical, playing our economy in a larger way, and they're also Unshackled is vouching for. I think that's a great story to know. So, you like to mention any other case studies or examples that you're proud of being with the Unshackled Ventures? Also, the personal stories about, you invested in certain ventures and you're really proud of it. And looking at how the day zero was and looking at day 100, how they have been shaped up.
Yeah, there's so many. I think a single success story might be too difficult to pick and fit into the time we have here. But I mean, the stories of the founders that we back are pretty remarkable. We have founders that grew up as farmers that are building software companies. We
Wow.
have commodity traders and software engineers who are now farmers growing lemna and extracting protein out of it. And I share that because like the spectrum of success is only possible because of this marrying of immigrant talent, ambition, hustle, and really grit. One of my first investments at Unshackled was in a company called Cash Energy. We met Arpit, the founder, who is an immigrant from India, when he was finishing his PhD in mechanical engineering at UIUC. And essentially, what he's building at Cash is long duration energy storage solutions. So, really harvesting energy into limestone pellets, which is an incredibly safe way to transport and store energy and incredibly cost efficient. His solution today is now going to power a small town in Alaska during the winter so that they can have energy. Um,
Wow.
those stories are the stories that I think I just get so excited about. And when you look at Arpit and his journey to the US, what it took, um, being an immigrant from India and growing up the way that he did, to coming to the US to study and get his PhD, to then deciding to build a transformational business around energy, which is such a crucial conversation that we're having in this country right now, to now seeing it be implemented to affect real lives in a small town in Alaska. Um, this is why I do what I do, right? The why, coming back to that, is I'm here to solve problems that I care about, that are affecting communities that I care about. And so Arpit was, I think, because he was one of the first investments I made at Unshackled, it holds a special place for me.
No, and I think it's a very big problem that he's solving. Any problem related with energy is going to be very crucial now, considering like I come from software background. So, looking at how the servers are consuming energy now, I think it's one of the bottleneck that's gonna soon we are gonna experience. So anything related with energy, I think each one of us is looking forward to solve that problem or need to have a solution for.
Yeah.
Forget about the latter part of being, furnishing more life, but having access to energy at a very rare parts of globe where there is the basic things are struggling. I think solving that challenge is a very innate challenge in itself, like that needs to be solved, and somebody has to look or innovate very differently that what they are doing. And so what is that Unshackled did to this particular founder, which was something not in sight of him, or he must have not foreseen that this would happen, but because of Unshackled has walked into their life, or your investment and community has walked into life, certain different doors that have opened up. So what that success story looks like to him?
Well, I think the reality for us that we keep very apparent on our team is immigrant founders are going to succeed with or without Unshackled. We are here to accelerate the rate at which they succeed. And in the case of Arpit, he always knew he wanted to build this. Even before going into his PhD program, he knew that his background and his passion and where he wanted to spend the rest of his life was in solving for this kind of solution. And so his PhD path, and he says this himself, was really, it gave him a way to stay in this country on a student visa while also de-risking parts of the business. And so when we met Arpit, it was really about unlocking so much of the potential that was already within him, so much of the things that he had already de-risked through his PhD program around the actual core technology that he was hoping to just scale. And so he came to us when he was looking at that like clear inflection point when he knew that he needed capital to really expand on this idea, leveraging his insights and leveraging his knowledge. And we were able to provide him with, again, that friends and family type round to be the first believers in him and his ambition, and also unlock him on the immigration front, right? And really supporting that transition from being an international student to also different visa pathways that enable him to build freely in this country. So it's been incredibly cool to see kind of his own journey over the past 3 years, both like company levers that he's unlocked to raise follow-on rounds of capital. We were not the last people who invested in cash. He's gone on to raise different rounds of capital, but we were the first to believe in him. And I think that is why Unshackled exists, is to be that first bet into people who are maybe overlooked by other VCs.
Oh, so this was like a very clear story of a founder who knew what is supposed to happen, or moving forward, what the path looked like. But I'll just like to understand one more story from you before we move on to certain different segments of VC funding. There are many stories that we know, but there is one that I relate the most, or one I feel like what investors could do to founders is a phenomenal journey. Is about the Canva. When the Melanie Perkins had an idea and she knew that this kind of product needs to be developed, what she didn't know by then is like, how tech can, basically unfold this and, make it more accessible to the entire world. And she had no clue because she had no technical background in which the software needs to be molded. But the investors basically, helped her find her co-founders in terms of a tech and help somebody pursue that idea at a very bigger level to take and, have Canva existed today, what it is. So, is there that kind of a story that Unshackle has? I will like, really looking forward to such stories, what after unlocking potential, maybe you have helped founders pivot very well, or maybe, help them grow by adding someone to their boat, or, is anything that you think that Unshackle has done this kind of unconventional journey too?
Yeah, I mean, I think so many of our immigrant founders have gone through those pivots and those journeys, because the reality that we know is the companies that we invest in at pre-seed are often very different companies that go and raise seed, Series A, and beyond, right? It is a natural, the pivot process is a natural part of the pre-seed journey, right? You are really here. Pre-seed is really about de-risking the business even further for yourself and answering key questions to answer your hypothesis. And so as you go through that journey, the original concept that you came and pitched us with might change. And that's completely okay. I think we're very comfortable with that. We always like to say we are here to be, and we don't take board seats, but we are often on a founder's board of trust. And the way that we're able to get on a founder's board of trust is by seeing the human before the founder. And when you're able to build that trust with founders, they come to you to ask questions. They come to you to share, when things aren't going well, when things may be looking a bit murky, when they may have to pivot. There is a true business case for building trust with founders. And I think, unfortunately, in the VC industry, that has somewhat gone away, where there's less value on that and more on just like, are you hitting these metrics? Are you saying are you doing what you said that you were going to do? And for us, it's really appreciating, okay, we are here with you. We're here to be long-term partners. We're here to be and support you even when you go and raise follow-on rounds of capital. So we have founders that have raised beyond Series B, where we're still the first call that they make when something goes wrong or when something goes right and they want to celebrate. And so in general, I would just say that that experience, the Melanie type of Canva experience, is not uncommon at the earliest stages of building.
Wow. Wow, good to know that. I'm sure, like after listening to this, you are gonna hit with many other requests and many other pitch decks from Passionate Pulse aspiring entrepreneurs community, and
I hope
I'll
so.
be looking forward to that. So, when it comes down to a pitches, like what type of pitch that you look forward, and what is that most important thing that you already mentioned about the unique experiences, particular problem space that they are relating with. On top of it, is there any trait that you observe in the founders that stands most to Unshackle? I mean, except these two, is there any third trait that you look forward to?
We think a lot about our investment decision frameworks internally. And I think I mentioned a lot of what we focus on in our conversations, right? The distance traveled, the person, the why you, why now. But we do have very specific frameworks that I think founders are often like shocked by when they have a pitch conversation with us because it is very unconventional to the way other VCs conduct pitch conversations. But I think in general, when you look at the VC industry, we're mainly gauging IQ and EQ. And at Unshackled, we've added a few more. So we gauge IQ, EQ, SQ, and AQ. And SQ and AQ, SQ is the social quotient. AQ is the adaptability and adversity quotient. And so, with IQ, it's really evaluating, okay, what's like your secret sauce? What unique insight do you have in this space? Why are you the right person to solve this problem? The founder problem fit. Um, how deeply do you understand this pain point? How deeply do you understand the market? That's really what IQ is gauging. Uh, EQ, which is, the emotional quotient, is your ability as a founder, I think, to really tell that story. And so there is part of us underwriting the potential of founders and underwriting their ability to tell that story, not just to us, but to customers, to follow on investors down the line, right? That is incredibly important, but also tell the story to potential talent. A huge part of being a founder is being able to recruit really great talent. And so that comes down to like, do you have the leadership charisma to get people excited by what you're building and get them on your team? So that's what we kind of evaluate in the emotional quotient. And then there's AQ and SQ, and AQ is that adversity, adaptability, really appreciating how have you gone through the pivots in your life today? What are the kind of prioritization frameworks you use to guide your thinking, to guide your focus, and tell us more. It does tap into more of that distance traveled story. And then SQ is the social quotient. So your ability to really connect with someone across the screen. I think that's something that immigrant founders often forget, is that a huge part of the investment process is making the person across the screen trust you. That is a fundamental part of the VC founder relationship.
That's wonderful, Ale. I think looking at, the different aspects of Q versus just a common cues that any VCs would be like looking forward to. So now coming back to, a founder's journey, founders often have the question like, what VCs are looking into them. But there are also certain myths that the founder is always, having the preconceived notions. And what are those myths that you think as a VC have, spotted and that needs to be addressed that, okay, if these are the things that happens, this is a complete myth. Like many people talk to me, they mention that they have just have a co-founder because they want to raise the VC fund. Till then, they were like had a solo journey walked in, but as and when they decide to have investor rounds, they make sure that there is a co-founder walking in. So there are many myths around it, and people try to fit them in the metrics of VCs. But what are those? That is something is a burning question that any founder would like to understand from the VC itself.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think there is this preconceived notion of how pitch conversation should go. And I've noticed that that leads to founders showing up to these calls in a way that is just so obviously inauthentic to them. But, they think they need to act a certain way or respond a certain way or give kind of the perfect sales pitch or answer questions in a way where they're answering it in a way that we think we want to hear versus what they actually believe. And what that does is, one, it comes off as you actually don't know what you're talking about, or you don't have a lot of confidence in what you're saying. But two, it's also that you're just disingenuous, right? And getting on a pitch call and giving a 5-second intro on who you are and then diving straight into the solution and not trying to build a connection with the investor across the screen is actually doing you a huge disservice in allowing you to accomplish one of the most important pillars in a VC founder relationship, which is trust. So I always encourage founders to slow it down, look the investor in the eyes. The investor who cares about you, so human first, founder second, will want to know about these stories and your solution, right? There's an opportunity to really share more about you. And immigrant founders specifically are some of the most humble founders that I have ever come across, right? We had one founder in our portfolio who was operating in the AI space, wrote 6 books on generative AI, and never once mentioned that he was an author of 6 books in Gen AI until the very end of our process. Um, that type, like, those are the things you need to be talking about, right? You need to be sharing why you are the right person to build in this space and all of the experience and all the incredible ambition and knowledge that you bring. But sometimes I find immigrant founders are so humble that they forget to share that. They forget to share like their personal stories and how those impact how they make decisions at the company level. So I would just encourage founders to not undermine the value in that. Get to know the investor across the screen too. I always appreciate it when founders come to conversations with thoughtful questions that they ask me. I always give founders time. I switch the tables. Ask me questions now. Like, what do you want to know about Unshackled? What do you want to know about how we make investment decisions? What do you want to know about my thoughts on this space? That's how you build trust with an investor. Doing more of that is crucial.
Oh, great. I'll be looking forward to understand more about the female founders now that you mentioned about the common things that a founder perceives and, they kind of downplay their own personal experiences or some of the stories that should be coming and also bringing that authenticity, like being natural to themselves. It's sometimes, they are overwhelmed, going to VCs or investors and they're looking for that capital to raise their babies. So the more of a emotional and also the performance pressure that goes beneath, I think so that's where they start losing the authenticity. But going back to this question again and looking at, how you have approached female founders so far and what are some of the traits that you observe? What are some of the energy boost that you like to give to our audience today? If somebody is out there as a female founder looking forward to raise their first round or even pre-seed round, what are some of the things that you will help them advise?
I often see a lot of female founders who second guess whether or not they're ready to invest or to raise venture capital dollars. And I think it is an incredible strength in female intuition to really make sure that we have all our check boxes covered. But I would also, encourage the female founders out there that you don't have to have all of the answers, and that's okay, right? If you refine your pitch, if you enter these conversations with confidence, and you can speak to the fact that you have the potential to uncover even more if you were to raise venture capital dollars and the insights you bring, better than anyone else. That type of confidence is so important to bring to these conversations. And so raising is not just about proven results, especially at the pre-seed stage. And if you want to wait for the perfect proven results or the perfect timing, you may be losing critical time and opportunities out of fear, right? So step into that confidence. There's so much knowledge that you inherently have within yourself, and go find the investors that are willing to back your potential.
Yeah, I think you addressed a very critical area, considering that a lot of female founders, first of all, question themselves whether this is the right time for me, whether I'm all ready or not. Whereas, how the male counterpart thinks, like, they feel they're very confident in solving the problem. So I think it's inherently how we are wired or how we have, probably raised. That
Mm,
can also play a lot of role, but maybe, the future generation of us would act very differently. But today's females need to know that, take a plunge, move, and go solving the problem. That's the first priority you should hold versus going into a lot of dilemmas of whether you should do it, whether you have a confidence to you know have answer all the questions or whatever it is. So I think that's where the investors play a major key role. If they are letting somebody down, or somebody has ill experiences, whether in their work life, or where the first investors that they have talked to have put them little down, or it's not, it's just a human beings react differently, perceive differently, but that doesn't mean you should let your guards down, and I'm really happy to understand that. But having said that, there are certain systematic ways that the VC world is perceived, and there are also systematic ways that the VC plan their portfolios throughout an year. They have their own checklist also to fulfill, like, we have poured enough into this industry, now we'll go to this trend or this industry. So they also have certain systemized way to operate. So would you like to address some of the myths about it or some of the facts about it that we should be aware?
yeah, I think the point around some of the systematic effects of how VC has traditionally been operated and run do trickle down into your point earlier around how much VC dollars go into female founded startups, right? And I will say that I think there has been progress. There's definitely been more awareness and a push for funding women-led companies. And honestly, I think that awareness and that push is thanks to the women in this industry, investors, founders, organizations like All Raise that continue to not let this issue fly under the rug again. So I see progress in consciousness. Now we need to see that in actual implementation, right? Because we know capital allocation still lags. We know the stat, it's said everywhere, but it's important to keep reiterating it. Less than 3% of VC dollars go to female founded teams. And so I continue to believe that the biggest gap remains in capital allocation, decision making power, right? We need more women to be writing checks. And there is this reality in our industry that I think needs to be talked about more, that VC has a retention problem when it comes to retaining female check writers. There are a lot more analyst and associate level female investors. But when you make your way up to the principals, the partners, the GPs, that number starts to drop. And it's a problem because we know the impacts that it has. The data shows that women investors, when we're present, are more likely to invest in female founders. So I would say if there's a systemic gap that I think still needs to be paid more attention to, is the retention that we keep in the venture ecosystem of female check writers long term.
And what could be the reasons why do you think the female founders or like the female investors are not graduating that they should have been? What are some of the common problems or the challenges that they go through? That's why they decide to step down.
I mean, it ranges from a lot of different things, and thankfully, I've never personally been in that position, but I have heard in through my broader networks around just like cultural mismatches or values misalignment when you join a fund and you realize, oh, um, we're actually not aligned as I thought we were when I first joined the fund. And as you spend time at a fund, maybe those issues start to come about. Or um, just I think community is a huge aspect of this industry. And if you don't build your community early on, as you go throughout your venture career, I I'm assuming it could get very lonely. And so as female investors, we go through our career and we start to see less female investors around us at that same level or at that same space or career trajectory that we're in. Maybe it does get lonely, and maybe there's this interest to be a part of industries that are already there, right? That have encouraged female leadership at the highest levels for decades. I think there could be multiple reasons why this is happening. Um, I don't know. It's a bigger question.
Yeah, that's possible. Maybe, I should be checking up with some of the veteran female investors and looking forward, what really goes from their own experiences. If
Yeah.
peers have dropped earlier, that they should have not been, or, as you said, like the value mismatch, I think that's one of the critical thing to play in any career for we female, I guess. Looking at how they decide to, you know, pull off early, or they don't find that supportive energy or the values or the ethics mismatch, or in general the leadership, how they are giving them the opportunities to be at the forefront, or lead something and back something, when the time goes wrong, how they beat, themselves first versus the others. So I think there is a lot that has to be unfold, and maybe a separate discussion or the separate podcast will be, valuable to do that. But coming across with the Unshackle, and a very interesting question that I have now is, what is the smallest check that Unshackle can give as a pre-seed, and what is the largest check that we could be expecting from Unshackled Ventures?
The lowest check that we've written is probably 150K. Um, but I would say on average, like moving forward, our lowest check is anywhere between 300K. Our highest check is at 750K to date. I think we're very flexible in working with founders to better appreciate like what amount of capital is the right amount of capital to unlock the next card that gets you to the next round of funding. But we typically stay within that 300 to 750K range with flexibility to maybe go a little bit up, maybe go a little down, depending on capital needs.
Oh, wonderful. Now we'll go into the rapid fire round. I think till now we have understood what VCs are looking forward, and unconventionally how things can also move forward. So it more or less it comes down to the founders' problem space that they're solving, and how they are, closely minded to that problem space to get the solution. That's where everything is boiling down. And looking at the immigrant founders, if they are in the United States and looking forward to build something, I think now we don't need to be that lonely, or we don't need to delay our success, or solving something that you could solve uniquely. And
Exactly.
that's where the Unshackled Ventures can play a role, and it's very thankful to do that. But now let's
Yeah.
get into the rapid fire, Ale, and I have some interesting questions for you. The first question that we always ask on a podcast is, whether it's a founder, entrepreneurs, the CEOs, or even the investors, is the book that you would recommend for our founders, coming with your own experiences, that you think that the founders should read this book.
Mm. I just finished a book called Frames of Mind by Howard Gardner.
Mm.
I would absolutely recommend this book to any founder building. And the main idea of this book is everyone, Gardner kind of dives into kind of the 5 forms of intelligence, which when someone says intelligence, everyone probably thinks about intellectual intelligence, right? But
Mm.
the reality is there are many forms of intelligence. And that's really, like we talked about before, really what we gauge in founders, right? At Unshackled, when we're evaluating a founder's IQ, EQ, SQ, AQ, it's because being a successful founder goes beyond being intellectually intelligent. Of course, that's probably the most important. If we were to weigh them out,
Mm.
you need to have founder problem fit, but there are so many other forms of intelligence that are crucial to founder success. And I think this book does an incredible job of kind of laying them out and also giving practical strategies on how to enhance these within yourself, should you be conscious and willing enough to work on it.
Mm. So that book is something that we'll be putting out for all of you to, take a look, or, we might even post a link that Ali has just mentioned.
Yeah.
Next question, Ali, is, more from the founder's point of view. What is one underrated skill or a talent that you think the founders should have? And, maybe they're just not looking at it, but as an investor, you think that's a gold.
learn how to connect with the investor across the screen. I said it before, but it does require a level of skill and like personal human connection to step outside the bounds of what you think a traditional pitch call should be and really set yourself up for success. So come to those pitch call conversations with questions for that investor. Learn to be that bridge early on and start building that relationship from the first time that you meet. I think that human connection and relationship building component is not just critical with customer success, but also investor success.
Hmm. Interesting. And I think that human connection, more or less, you have been, boiling down to, which is something probably the founders are not valuing. It's not the case, but I think they're just not being that warmly appreciated. And
Mm.
that's where this gap could be I mean, I don't know, I'm just guessing
Oh,
around.
absolutely. And I always say it is both the founder's responsibility to show up to these calls and being willing to share that part of themselves.
Yeah.
But it also is a huge responsibility. And part of the responsibility is on the investors to give founders that space to do that. Um, it goes both ways.
What's the best trait in the founders generally is a gold mine to you personally as an investor?
Yeah, if I were to pick one, it would probably be obsession. Like I always look for obsession in founders, and it, obsession shows up in different ways for different people. But if you couldn't imagine waking up and doing anything else besides solving the problem that you're solving, I want to hear about that obsession. And a founder's obsession, when articulated well to a VC, is really hard not to get excited and want to support.
Yeah, I think that obsession will keep the founders in the longer marathon versus the shorter sprints.
Exactly.
I mean, it definitely makes sense, and especially when you're looking out and writing the checks pre-seed level. I think that's one of the biggest trait that you should be observing for sure. There is one last question that I have in the rapid fire is if I, spell out certain words, what the next word comes to you, especially when I say hustle.
What the next word is?
Yeah, what the next word comes to your mind when somebody says
Mm,
hustle to you?
hustle, curiosity,
Oh, uh,
curiosity. I
okay.
think we think a lot about, I think immigrant hustle is inherent within most immigrants that come to this country.
Yeah.
Um, but it has to be coupled with a lot of curiosity, right? And structured curiosity. Like, what are you choosing to focus your time on? And
Mm.
continuous curiosity throughout the founder journey is, I think, what enables them to succeed and identifying when they're maybe going down the wrong path, and that continuous wanting to learn and curiosity is essential to enabling the hustle.
Oh, well, that's nice. I mean, I thought that the hustle would take it to the negative down, but looking at what you mentioned, I think it's worth hustling. Now, like the last question of this particular podcast that I may address, considering that we have a time constraint. And this is actually a surprise question as well from a lot of the community that I went in and asked for the surprise question. And to my surprise, the surprise questions from the founders of the professionals that have come across is very different. Like, they're interested in understanding how somebody can enter the VC world and what does it look like, investor world to them. And I mean, to my surprise, considering the founders or the entrepreneurs is asking this question, um, is also a surprise to our community or the podcast questions that usually will show up. So I think being a female entrepreneur or the female investor, either ways, this question is worth attempting. And that too at a very early age that you started on this particular league.
Yeah. My advice to anyone who asks me like, how do I break into this industry, is start building your community now, right? Look for those value aligned investors, investors that you can connect with on a human level, and find ways to support the work that they're already doing, right? If you connect on a human level, it's very likely that they're doing work that you find valuable and you find important. How can you support that work? This industry is very transactional in nature, but when you start building your community with intentionality and care, it will get you into spaces and communities and rooms with others that will also support your journey into venture. And so, for me, I started doing that with Somos VC, which I talked about. That Somos VC was that community for me. And it really all started with looking for investors that looked at like me and that were values aligned. And the doors opened for me from there when I was able to support the work that they were doing. So, you often hear start doing the job before you have the job. Not everyone has, angel capital to go and invest in startups at an early age. But I think there are other ways that you can start doing the job before you have the job. And part of it is building those investor relationships. And that's a huge part of my job today is continuing to build investor relationships with the broader ecosystem. But it just allows you to get into spaces that you wouldn't otherwise.
This is definitely a different answer that you unfolded, how this journey should start, and looking at, that you should be resonating with something first in order to support someone, in order to boost someone, and, being that platform. So if you have that within that you want to, I mean, inherently, a lot of females are mothers, right? Um,
Mm.
and I think every girl is born with that nature. So supporting is something is very inherent to us as a female, and taking this different route means you're, nurturing many more children, and, allowing something to come, a lot of dreams to come true. And these dreams are something like which are solving some problems that a lot of us are facing too. So I think being an investor board or going there is a huge support, and I think a lot of
Yeah.
generations, inherently will thank you, although they don't know your name or whatever. But if some solutions come in real and it is beneficial to a lot of communities, and inherently it's gonna be that route. So, Ale, thank you for being here and being so authentic and being little unconventional. I think a lot of preconceived notions that I, as a founder, had, or a lot of my friends who had. I think you just broke into, like, you don't need to have that 30-second speech, perfect lines. You don't need to show up with certain great statistics to, blow away investors, but there is a huge human angle to it, and how you solve it, how you attempt it. And
Yep.
pitch could be, your pitch could be different as well.
Amazing. This was a great conversation. Appreciate the invite, Pranali. And for any founders out there who, want to get connected to Unshackled, again, we have our pitch us form on our website that's open year round. Again, it's never too early. So excited to see the founders that come through.
Yeah, I love the sentence, or like the statement, your mission statement. It's never too early. And if you are someone who is looking forward to, build something and need a support, I think we have opened up a gold mine to you at a very early stage. Get help from validation to even finding your own community, or finding whether your idea is something worth pursuing. And there is someone out there with more experience, having great statistics, or even industry experiences, which can help you navigate your hustles at this particular time. And Unshackle is viewing all your hustles as a curiosity. So I think there is a great way to look forward. Thank you, Ale, once again, and
Mhm.
thank you, Unshackled Ventures, for
Thank
coming
you.
to Passionate Pulse podcast, where we guide an aspiring founders community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pranali. Have a good one.